Taste.
Look.
Smell. Tree.
Bird. Bell. Touch.
Taste.
Look.
Smell.
Tree.
Fish.
Bird.
Bell. So do as the poet says and listen.
And listen.
And listen. And listen. And listen.
And listen.
Flyer or volunteer to use the QR code on the front and back takes you to the survey. So you can help us make the event better next year. And there's £100 prize for the business program. And in the unlikely event of fire alarm, we proceed to do the romantic room actually of the front program. On to the last event festival. I'm very glad to be introducing Tom Knuckles from Local Home Retrofit, CIC. Before moving to Scotland in 2019, Tom worked on community energy in Sydney. He co-founded Local Home Retrofit CIC, which he started with Chris Harris in 2021. Local Home is a not-for-profit community retrofit work based in Glasgow. It was set up to address the challenges of home retrofit and make better retrofit more accessible to more people. Tom Knuckles.
Been having a good festival so far. Yeah. And sort of local home retrofit in an organisation. Only a few of you, that's great. All right. So you're going to find out a little bit more after today's talk. Those of you that haven't heard of us before. So what I'm going to do in about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes, is a fairly short presentation just to talk about the importance of making our homes more energy efficient and zero carbon. why that's an important thing, what is retrofit, what are the challenges that are preventing us from achieving retrofit, and what we think the solution is, what the way forward is and what you can do. And then after that, we'll have probably half an hour or more that we can have a bit of Q&A. Okay? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself to begin with. So I'm Australian, as Stephen already mentioned, and I'm from Sydney. And my story is that back in 2013, I was working in one of those high-rise buildings in that photo there. I was working for an international law firm, a law firm that had its offices in places like Australia, South Africa, Brazil, Texas. They were really big in resource extraction, especially fossil fuels. And I kind of knew I was working for the bad guys. I wasn't doing that bad work. I'm not a lawyer. I was doing sustainability and IT projects. But it became increasingly clear to me that I was working for a company that was doing that, fracking, and just doing as much as they could to support their customers to contribute to the extraction of more climate damaging fossil fuel extraction and burning. So I was in a fairly privileged position at the time. I was able to transition into a new career, and my new career was community energy, which really means communities coming together to decide, develop, own, operate their energy systems of the future. And that's not just about energy generation like solar panels and wind turbines. It's also about energy efficiency projects. So I consider that what I'm doing now and local retrofit is an extension of that work. When I started getting into that space, I was volunteering on the far left side there. I was volunteering for a group in Sydney, and we had a lot of fun putting solar panels on the roof of craft breweries, and we had some fun launch parties as part of that. But the main thing I was doing was working for an organisation called Community Power Agency, and we supported communities across Australia in developing their energy projects. I moved to Scotland in 2019 and was able to continue that work with a new employer, Energy for All, my previous job. And so that photo in the bottom right-hand corner is Glasgow Community Energy celebrating the installation of solar panels on one of the schools where I put solar panels onto, and I helped them with that project. For me, the key driving principle for the work that I do is that I believe that it's essential for the transition to clean energy and to a zero carbon future, for our response to climate to be both fast and fair. Quickly explain what I mean by it. Of course, it has to be fast because we all know that if you don't act fast, the impact is going to be bigger. If it's slow, we're going to have more and more serious impact. And the slower we go, the more those people who contribute the least who are going to feel the worst impact, they're going to feel those things. So we have to move fast, otherwise it's just going to be inherently unfair. But the second piece of it is fair. And for me, this is perhaps more important piece. And I just start saying fair and fast. Because if the transition isn't fair and isn't seen to be fair, then people in their community are far too likely to decide that this transition stuff is happening in for them and that we need to start pushing back against it. So, for example, in the UK, in England, there's been an effective ban on onshore wind for quite a number of years. And I would argue that's because it wasn't seen to be fair. The way that wind turbines were being rolled out, people weren't being given enough say, benefit, and ownership of those wind turbines. And so they started using their political power of veto. They pushed back at that, slowed down the transition to clean energy. So it's important to do that. And I think community energy is one of the best ways to make sure that it's both fast and fair. These days, I'm part of the team at Local Home Retrofit. As Stephen said, I'm co-founder with Chris Harris, who's on the far left-hand side, and that's me on the right-hand side, obviously. And we're now a team of 4. My colleague Carmen's at the back of the room, and she'll be talking out a little bit later. And we've also got Jan in the middle there. So we're rapidly growing this team, and we're on a mission to make retrofits accessible to as many homes in Glasgow as possible. to rapidly decarbonise our buildings. Why are we doing this? Well, we need to act. There's clearly a climate emergency. We're feeling the impacts of it more and more every day. There's no longer a question of avoiding the impacts of climate change. They're going to arrive. They have started arriving, and the sooner we act, the more we can reduce those impacts. But we also need to coordinate with our communities to become more resilient, to prepare for the changing climate that's come. We need to be doing both of these things. Can't just build bunkers. And what Loco Home is primarily about is the fact that our homes are responsible for 1/3 of Glasgow's carbon emissions. The UK is widely recognised as having some of the most inefficient housing stock in Europe, some people say the world. So that chart there talks about how much temperature is lost in a 5-hour period. And you can see that we're sort of the worst performing country in Europe. Interestingly, the older countries got better performing countries. So we really ought to be better than what we are. And this is primarily driven because our homes are in a poor state. They're poorly maintained, they're inefficient, uncomfortable, and they're unhealthy. Yet, new buildings are not the solution. It's often sort of cited as fact or prediction. 80% of the homes that will exist in 2050 have already been built today. Can't build our way out of this problem. We certainly can't demolish and new build our way out of this problem. And that's important because every time we demolish a building and put a new one in its place, we're using huge amounts of resources, generating massive carbon emissions. So the embodied energy in a new building is huge. So we can't just destroy buildings to build new buildings. In fact, it's really important we have to retrofit. So what is retrofit? Well, it's a combination of two words. It means to retrospectively fit things. So you might have a ship, maybe it's a naval vessel that might have been built some number of years ago. Maybe its technology has become out of date, so they bring it back into the dock and they fit the new technology into that ship. Then scrap the ship, totally functional. They just need to put in some new technology. But we're not talking about ships, we're talking about homes. So retrofit, in the context that we're talking about it, means to fit new energy efficiency and renewable heating into existing buildings. That means things like insulation, ventilation systems, and heat pumps. And the great news is that when we do that, we make our homes a lot more comfortable, a lot more healthy. They have a lower environmental impact, and most importantly, we're reducing the carbon emissions. Now, an important point to get across is that it's not like making our homes become more energy efficient is a new thing that we started talking about in 2023 or 2022. We've been doing this for some time. It's now very commonplace for households to have loft insulation. Almost every home has double glazing on their windows. So we have come a long way in retrofitting our homes. But unfortunately, that existing approach, which is really, it's like a market-driven single measures approach, it's only gotten us so far and it's come with a bunch of problems. So we need to have a different approach. So the market-led, measures-led approach is really just driven by the idea that if you provide the right incentives to people who say, you need to all have double glazing now, here's some grants and here's some building regulations to make that a new requirement, then the window industry is going to respond and using all of their sales people to go out and sell double glazing to people. That kind of works. But the problem is we have things like there's a performance gap. The promised performance improvements have actually not achieved the actual performance has not achieved the promised performance. So we have a gap between where we need to be and what we've actually getting. Also, because people are looking at putting in windows and block insulation and other methods, they're not thinking about the whole home. And so they're not managing some of the really significant risks that come with this. And there's a litany of bad retrofit stories where things have gone wrong. That includes things like mold, and in some extreme cases, there's very serious health impact. People die. So in response to all of that, we had the development of the standard for retrofit, PAS 2035. Not to talk about that standard, that's pretty boring stuff. But the point is that what it says is you need to have a whole building approach. You need to have someone who comes in and looks at the building as a complex system, looks at the needs of the owners and the occupants, and thinks about it holistically to come up with a coherent plan. And part of that plan might be upgrading the windows. It might be putting in loft or wall insulation, but you're thinking about that coherently and you're making sure that you will get the performance you want and you're avoiding the risks. So I'm going to talk now about the major elements that make up retrofit. First of all, airtight. Around about 1/3 of our heat loss occurs through uncontrolled ventilation. Drafts. Our houses have got a very leaky and they just leak the warm air out of it. And we'll feel that most keenly when it's a windy, cold night. That's when we particularly need to turn up our heating. And so we have to do something about that. That picture is of a professional sort of thermographer. And what he's done is he's gone into a home and he's actually put a blower door on the front door. And that sucks the air out of the property. He's then able to go around with what he's got in his hand is like a miniature smoke machine, like you've seen in a live music venue. So generating that sort of, not smoke, that sort of vapor, whatever it is. And he can then go around and find where the air is streaming in. So all this air is being sucked out of the property through the front door, it has to come in somewhere. And where it's coming in this property is underneath the windowsill. And you can see that streaming air coming in, and where it was doing it, it's streaming onto the sofa where this person sat in the living room trying to be comfortable. You can imagine they're probably feeling pretty cold. And that house is obviously, like many houses, just losing a lot of energy through its drafts. Now, we can't live in hermetically sealed boxes. We need to be able to breathe. So if we make our homes a lot more airtight, then we need to then bring in controlled ventilation. So typically what that will look like is sort of vents, maybe there'll be fans to drive that, so mechanical ventilation. But really the gold standard on this is mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. So what that will do is it will take the warm and stale air out of your home, and as it goes out, it goes through a heat transfer. It captures more than 90% of the heat energy, transfers out to the cool and fresh air coming in. So you have warm, fresh, and dry air coming into your property through the ventilation system. Then we've got insulation. Well, we kind of all know what insulation is. What's so special about insulation when we think about it in a whole home approach? Well, what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that the entire property is fully insulated without any gaps. There's no thermal bridges, there's nowhere where there's gaps in the insulation. Think about a thermos. Thermos is fully insulated all the way around. It's not like it's just got a bit of insulation on the top, for the loft, and the bottom, for the floor. Everywhere is insulated, and that's why it works. And we need to do the same with your home. And where the tricky bits come is where the floor meets the wall, and where the wall meets the roof. That's where the detail exists, and that's where we need to make sure that you actually have insulation going all the way to the edge and going all the way around. Don't have those gaps. And finally, renewable heating. So low carbon sources of heating. Primarily, this is about getting off gas. Obviously, gas is a high carbon heating source, and we need to be moving on to low carbon heating. And right now, for most homes, the most viable form of low carbon heating is heat pumps. We'll talk more about that later. So there's a picture of a heat pump. I'm going to get a better picture of that. Okay, so if this is all so wonderful, then what's holding us back? Why haven't we done more of this sort of whole home retrofit? Well, unfortunately, retrofit is complicated, expensive, risky, difficult, it's hard to find contractors to do the work. There's also road operators. There's a difficult space as a household to navigate on your own. If you do want to tackle this complicated, difficult, expensive process, then you need to start to go out and find suppliers. And there's plenty of people that want to take your money, do bad work. What this photo is showing is someone that's been, I don't know, they've been convinced to put in loads of poorly installed loft insulation. You can see there's sort of like clumps of blankets. And then they've also put spray foam inside on the roofings. You don't need to insulate an already insulated space. And when you do that, you're likely to have moisture problems and those beams in the roof could be starting to rot. So we need to avoid bad work. We also have a marketplace problem. We have simultaneously a lack of supply, so tradespeople and suppliers that can actually do the work, and we have a lack of companies, lack of households that are stepping up and saying, I want to make my home ready for a zero carbon future. So this little snippet comes directly out of the Scottish Government's, one of their Scottish Government's policy documents. And what it says is exactly that configuration. They're exactly the next paragraph on the chart. They said that the lack of clear demand from household owners, the lack of clear demand for green heat sources is a major barrier to growth. But on the other hand, the market side is citing the lack of supply chain as a barrier to increased deployment. So what can we do about it? So I think it's really fair to say that the retrofit the type that we're talking about is like a new market, it's a new sector, and we are right at the early stage. The early innovators are who's currently doing it. People are doing it. But it's people that are motivated, who know about this. So we need to move retrofit from being a niche activity undertaken by people in the know and who are motivated, move it to being something which is mainstream and part of the everyday conversation. And one of the things that I particularly prefer out of this is to reflect my fast and fair thing. I think retrofit has real potential to be part of the front line of what you might call the culture wars. We've already started to see heat pumps being the target of huge amounts of misinformation. Heat pumps do work. Totally false to say that they don't. We can prove that they work, but that doesn't stop misinformation. And I think it's really important that we get out there and start explaining to people why retrofit is so beneficial and it brings so many advantages to our community. Start to have positive draw rather than people saying, "Oh, this is a bad idea. It's too disruptive, too expensive." We can't afford that. Part of the reason we can't afford is because we have to reap those benefits here in our communities. More healthy, more comfortable homes, all of those jobs, all of that investment that here in Glasgow, that's what we're about. And we need shared action. So, how do we solve those problems? We believe the best thing to do is to have a community-based organisation that can bridge the gap between the households who are wanting to take action and the supply chain who are looking for the right signals that there is actually a ready market for them. So our fundamental theory of change is that governments aren't going to act because if they were to start laying down a requirement that you spend huge amounts of money on operating your home, it's a guaranteed vote loser. Yes, they've started making some moves towards tightening regulations, but they're not mandated that we must do things. So they're not about. Governments tend to be more like weather vanes than signposts. They go the direction of prevailing mood rather than pointing the way ahead. And they're probably going to do that on this issue too. So what we need to do is we need to prove that there is the public support, that it can be done, and to therefore give policymakers confidence that moving in that direction is the right thing and a safe thing for them to do. And we believe that the best way for that to happen is for there to be a place-based intermediary to develop both the supply chain. Now, we didn't make this up on our own. We're other pioneering organisations have led. So in particular, Carbon Co-op and People Powered Retrofit, sister organisations, to each other in Manchester have really been a strong point of inspiration for us. So we're trying to do the same sort of thing in what they're doing. Or another way of putting it is, yeah, we've got a solution. We can sit there in between the Scottish Government's identified problem for how we're going to develop the market. So what we do is we work with householders. So we make it easier for people to create pathways for what they're going to do. We also draw out the stories and we share those stories so that people can see that it's actually possible and can be done. Influencing people and making this decision and making that pathway really clear for how they're going to get to greenhouse gas. We're also working with suppliers. This is a great example of a young woman who's in the traditional plastering industry, and she's rapidly transitioning over to traditional materials. And traditional materials are essential for the majority of local buildings. So many of local buildings which are traditional. We can't go and use mainstream modern building materials in our traditional buildings because it's going to create all sorts of problems. And we need a supply chain that's not only willing to move into retrofit, but knows the right materials for the right buildings. So we're starting to influence and we're doing a lot more of this work, bringing new people into the retrofit space. We do a lot of knowledge sharing, including webinars. And that ranges from the really basic stuff. So on the left-hand side there, we did a whole webinar about how you can improve the efficiency of your boiler simply by turning down the controls and what you need to do with a gas boiler and your heating system to get ready for a heat pump in the future. And on the right-hand side, it was a much more technical webinar than we did more recently, talking about if we're going to be doing internal wall insulation behind the lap and plaster in the traditional building, how do we do that safely? We're working with an architect to help guide us through that process. So sharing information, demystifying stuff. There's a link to our We've got a video page. We've got lots of videos. And importantly, we think this is as much of a social challenge as it is a technical challenge. So we're a member-based organisation, and if you become a member, you've got access to a forum on the left there. There's basically a lively discussion forum where people are sharing stories about how they've been able to or what they're planning to do to retrofit their home. And we have regular member meetings where we talk about what's working and we're trying to figure out how to build this business as well. So we're deeply engaged with our customers and supply chain around and we're running workshops all this time. It very much is driven by the community and a huge amount about local sort of mutual help. That photo on the left there is actually a photo of one of our members who's part of what we call the DIY group. And you'll notice there's someone there in orange, you can barely make it out. That's actually the partner. That's Jen Partner I mentioned a few slides ago. He's helping this homeowner with his DIY project. And a bunch of other people have come in and they're having a look at what he's done. But he's really doing some pioneering work, looking at how we can make his ground floor tenement more airtight, and he recognised he needs to do some plaster. We do walking tours. In fact, we participated in a walking tour at the Northern Day Festival. Under one roof was posting that, and we went along and provided the additional information about retrofit on that tour, and just lots of opportunities for connecting with other homeowners who are going through the challenge of retrofit. We also have a service. So we really guide households through the entire process from the earliest stage right to the end. The earliest point of learning about retrofit, how it's done, what it means, planning how you're going to do the retrofit for your home, implementing the retrofit measures, and then post-implementation, how we monitor and evaluate all that work. So we offer services throughout that entire life cycle. And we're doing open houses and case studies. We think that, as I mentioned, retrofit is as much a social challenge as a technical challenge, more a social challenge. And so therefore it's essential that we tell the stories about where it's working, where it hasn't. That photo on the left is a house on the south side of Glasgow that has been part of Doors Open Days Festival. And it's a home that's done a pretty deep retrofit on a traditional sandstone terrace. and they've gone and installed a heat pump. They actually did that without our help, and pretty amazing. They've navigated that really well. And after they've done it, they then found out about Loco Home, and they said, "Oh, we want to join Loco Home so that we can help other people to do what we've done." And they've generously opened up their house for a tour, and we were 10 times, more than 10 times oversubscribed. So it was very popular. People want to go into homes and learn about this and find out what this is all about. So we're hoping that we can do more open homes in that house and identify that already knows in other houses. To make this really real, give people the opportunity to hear from each other how it's working, how it hasn't worked, at whatever stage in the journey we're at. That's the event. Bit about his own, just to bring out some key points about it. The story behind this house is that the homeowners have recently purchased it when the house was in a very poor state of repair, so it needed major renovations, and they wanted to make some improvements to the house along the way. The point of that is that they were already prepared for doing some very disruptive work and quite expensive work. So you can see there's a couple of photos there. The left-hand one shows that they're preparing to knock down an internal wall and install the steel beam. And obviously that wall is about to come down. There's a picture of their sort of half-completed kitchen, and there's just a mess of rubble everywhere. And there's I believe, a new door leading onto the back of the property. And yeah, the state of the place through all of this has just been unbelievably destructive. But along the way, they've taken the opportunity to do things like install wall insulation. You can just see some peeking out from where they've bricked up an existing door there, and where that new wall is, they've put a heat pump right in front of that. And the point about this is that they've taken the opportunity. We think there's more than two, but in this example, there's two key moments where it's a great time to think about upgrading your home when you've just purchased it and when you're planning on doing major work anyway. Because it is disruptive. Maybe disruptive work, you should probably think about doing some energy efficient work at the same time. And what they've ended up with is a lovely house with a heat pump that is really comfortable and very healthy to live in. And I think they're enjoying that. Looking forward to being having an open tour there. So that's me pretty much done on my talk. What can you do today? Well, learning more about this stuff, coming to events, or if you've done that. I'd say the best thing to do is join our mailing list or become a member. I'll leave that one up, and we're going to do a bit of Q&A. And actually, I'm going to start with Q&A because it's going to be in two parts. I'm going to run a reverse Q&A. I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to give me some answers. And I'm really curious to hear what people have to think and have to say, what challenges people are facing. This is a great opportunity to have some of those. So first of all, to get things warmed up, start thinking about what your breakfast would be, by the way. I want to hear many people talk. Hands up. If after today's talk, you think we should be doing more to retrofit our homes. Pretty much. Keep your hands up. If you'd like to take the first step or next step in retrofitting your home. That's a good question. So, touch you all into that, didn't I? Yeah. But I think it's no surprise. You're a self-selecting group. You come here because you've got an interest in the topic. But I don't think that these are the only people interested in this. It's a very widely popular thing. Home renovation, responding to climate change, making our homes more comfortable, cheaper to eat, all of these things. There's a lot of people who are interested in that. Our membership growing years and rapidly. Real question this time. Thinking about your own situation, what might prevent you from making your home fit for the future? Resilient, warm, healthy, dry, and ultimately zero carbon. What sort of barriers do you think are in your way? Put your hand up and just shout it out. They're really nice and loud, because then we'll keep people online a little bit.
Stephen?
Getting agreement with your neighbours.
I live in a wild village, and there is
what the situation is. But you have no idea how to negotiate for the software supplier, which is a whole building solution, arguing for one time allowance, contribution, essentially.
Right, thank you. Anybody else? What's in your way? What barriers do you face? Come in the mic, I'll repeat your answer.
Somebody to help me organise it.
Someone to help you
We've
organise.
got the plan, we've got the money, and then it stopped.
Got the plan, got the money, and then, yeah, you've run out of road. You need some extra support.
Yeah, somebody to coordinate it, somebody to help us find contractors.
Yeah, thank you. This gentleman here.
Commerce and decoration in the flat. I don't know what you do about this.
Right.
Excellent.
How do you deal with, maybe heritage pieces like
Yeah.
cornices? Yeah, how do you not destroy that, how do you protect it? Yeah. So,
Lot of leadership, as you were saying, we are everything in the group family and the family, it's possible for alternative as compared to your individual house, and we get lost with the big announcement in the government and all these things to.
yeah, lack of knowledge,
Lack of
lack of
knowledge.
information,
Free knowledge.
and so,
Sorry.
speaking information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, right. Yeah. So you don't even know what you need to do, where you need to. Yeah, I think I want to get rid of that one. Windows, yeah, yeah. I do think it's sure, like, let's get away. So can you bring that back a little bit later when you're asking me questions? I'll get sitting over the mind. But the gist of what you were saying, as I've heard it, was is that you feel that your energy bills are low, you're living in a relatively modern place, probably okay in performance. But where can you go next? Yeah. We've been a flat sort of 10 minutes. About more than that, about half the room, right? Okay. Any other barriers? I'm going to move on. Yeah. Yeah. Conservation issues. And the cost. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a cost, I think. Yeah. Okay. Just okay, I'll move on. Hands up if it would be helpful to see a home that already has a heat pump. Would you like to have gone to that open home? Yeah. Yeah. In what ways would it be helpful? We've got some thoughts to share. Start with you, but over to you. Yeah.
I think it's really because some people have already alluded to sort of putting information out there, to actually see it working in operation. Hearing people's experience with Scottish winter with this, is it actually really good?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's interesting, there's so much misinformation when people who have genuinely had bad experience gives credence to the myths around heat pumps. But it is pretty hard to argue going into what someone had home who's had lower bills, they've got a heat pump, traditional buildings, in a cold climate, all of the things that we're told don't work, but for them it is working. And I think the only way we can tell that story is with the experience. I think as well there's another interesting aspect of that, which is the probably needs to put some effort into the bad story. Why did things go wrong? In what way was this person's bad experience, sort of a pretty bad person? So this new model.
Yeah, I want to stand next to a running one, just to check how loud it is.
Yeah, to get this full sensory experience. Yeah. How loud is it?
I don't think it's loud.
Also, I
I-
like how big are they? Like, you see
Yeah, I don't-
photos of
don't
how
wanna
does
spend-
that?
And
sometimes
sometimes
they-
and find out I can't sleep with it.
Sometimes it's surprising you see people standing next to them like, that's before. If you're going to put that in the garden, you want to know it. Try what it's like. Yeah. Okay, hold that question. I'll give you an option to ask questions in a minute. Okay. If you're going to go into a home, what else would you like to see other than a heat pump? What sort of things do you want to see in a home? If there was more opportunity to go and visit people's homes.
Insulation, the ventilation systems,
Installation and ventilation system.
solar panels.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. And that house has solar panels, by the way, and not Australian, and it's like, they're pretty unusual still in Scotland. So what do they look like?
Something we can install.
Yeah. For a proper heat pump.
I guess just like the first one is the performance thing, the decoration inside the house is, do you need to strip it right back or is it there?
How do people navigate those challenges that we all sort of raised in the room earlier? Yeah. Did you say between the ceilings and the floors? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, how do you manage that detail? Hands up if you'd like to sign up for our mailing list and keep informed about future work. Now, all, come on, we'll come give a handout of report. And we're a very professional looking email sign up to each day. Putting in you are consenting to be able to. Right, that's me done. So we'll turn the Q&A around. Who's got real proper questions? This time, please speak into the mic, so we're going to hand it around.
About flats, and like, can they work for like tenants or total flats?
Potentially they can. Now, when we think about heat pumps, we generally think of the dominant technology, which is an air source heat pump. And what that usually looks like is a fairly large external unit in the garden with pipes connecting it to the inside. Now, if you're on a top floor tenement, that's not going to be perfect. But there are other types of heat pump technology. So there is air to air, which is potentially suitable for smaller spaces. We have a small external unit perhaps on a balcony and a small internal unit blowing your warm air through your flat. Well, the thing that I'm more interested in, we're starting to see some examples of these actually being installed in tenements in Glasgow, is a heat pump that runs off the exhaust of the ventilation system. Now they exist, we're starting to see them installed, but they do require your heating demand brought down quite a lot. So unlike the big garden-based air source heat pumps, you can't just throw a large heat pump at it and know that it will heat your house. You need to do a heating amount of rotate that work drive down the energy demand. We're really interested in that space. Another way that heat pumps can work for top floor tenements is if you were to have some sort of communal heating system, and that would obviously be heat pump based with a variety of other. I think on the microphone, yeah. The gentleman at the front, let's go back to this bit.
I think you more or less answered the question about flats. I don't think the town of the fact that the plot six, but one of them is cottage plots. In my case, you can't have panels with all insulation, there doesn't exist. It's only about 30 years old, I believe. Because that would know that it would ensure it has to be used with all the neighbours. That's really the other thing that strikes me listening to all this is what we really saying is we need to get not in the homes we have in the past, which is a hard sell. I like to sit in roast. What I'm hearing you saying is about the well insulated property, certainly at the moment. But essentially that would provide the background in the winter and probably something else to bring the heat up, say the living room or something like that. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay. No. Hopefully that's not what I'm saying. Let me set the record straight. A well insulated home with a cheap ventilation system should be more comfortable than our current glass units. There's a range of reasons why we're comfortable staying in a home, and it's not just about the raw heat in the living space. When we think of You know, we might have a heating system with a thermostat, we might say we've got that turned to 22 degrees, so therefore it's 22 degrees in our house, in our home, but it actually won't be. It'll be 22 degrees near the thermostat, plus or minus, either there up and down. But over near the windows where it's big leak, it'll be quite a lot colder. And if we've got big windows, that cold air is going to be dropping off, and there'll be cold air running across the floor. We know that if we've got cold feet, we feel more cold. So removing those effects out of our homes is going to make us feel more comfortable. And I want to dispel any notion that we need to have our houses less temperature than we currently have. I do think there's a sensible conversation to be had about what is the comfortable temperature. And people might actually think about whether or not it's worth their while to pay all of that extra heating to get 23, 24 degrees so they can wear a t-shirt, when perhaps they could be quite comfortable at 21 and 20 degrees with a jumper and blanket. So
I like it sort of perfect portrait.
but you know, the reality is get yourself to a well-insulated building and moving less heat through the walls, the floors, and the heating systems. And then, yeah. All right, we're better move on. You okay? Yeah. So, you know, for the first thing.
So, checking on your membership, I just wonder how that has changed very piece in the past few years. Like, is there any points where you notice steeper incline in membership? Like like are you tracking like the journey at all? Like how long you spend on some of your events or chatting to you before you kind of think to take certain steps?
Yeah. Okay. Great. That's a fairly sophisticated question. I'm interested to chat to you afterwards. Find out where you're coming from. Our membership is open to homeowners, renters, tradespeople, anybody with a genuine interest in making our houses lower carbon, more comfortable, etc. Primarily, our members are homeowners who are thinking about taking renters. Last part of your question was how people are transitioning in and out of that membership as their journey goes on. Well, I think it's too early to say. There's very little actually done it. That is interesting. That open house was actually someone who came for it after the journey, and they're now staying as a member so they can share that information with other people. So we hope that's a model for the the one thing that comes to mind, and I'm really conscious of this on a regular basis, is that when we run events, when we run a series of webinars or we run public events, we definitely see the membership going out the door and actually having events, whether they're virtual or they're in person, that's when we're getting the membership going. So we kind of know that all we need to do is just work hard, get out there and raise people's awareness. This basic stuff, what that presentation I gave you, we've done that many times, we're going to continue to do that because so many people haven't heard some of that fundamental information. We know that's why people. Anything else about that? Is you okay? Yeah, great.
Thanks. Yeah.
So one of the biggest issues can be around financing. For people not sure about, you said one of the best things to retrofit is obviously you've bought a new house. What about people that have had a house for a while and stay in it, and does it obviously make more sense to do the whole house at the same time, or do you give advice options for maybe doing like piecemeal?
Great. Okay, so what we typically do is while we do whole house planning, so we're looking at the needs of the occupants and the owners and the entire house as a complex system, and we come up with a sensible plan for what measures we should put in place in what order. We're not saying that you need to be doing those things all at once. So part of the conversation with your homeowner will be what's affordable to you, what do you want to do affordably now versus what you might want to do. Do you want to do it all big bang approach, or do you want to spread it across time? And so if you want to spread it across time, let's talk about those measures that you can do now without being regretful that you've locked yourself out from doing something later. What's affordable, what's going to give you the best impact now versus your sort of lower impact things later on. That's definitely part of it. So you guide households to do it. I think it's probably going to be the norm that those people have to do.
It's not personal, it's personal, but it can be super. We have to provision your boiler very soon. What would you do?
Well, okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's something I'm really passionate about is like, we don't have a plan for what we're going to do when our boiler dies. You know what we're all going to do? We're either going to replace that boiler with another boiler. So your question is spot on. Even if you don't think your boiler is going to die, you really need to have a plan for what we're going to do when our boiler dies. My plan at the moment is when my boiler dies, I'm going to replace it with another boiler. And when I do that, I'm going to make sure that the boiler is right size. Most of our boilers are massively oversized. And I'm going to make sure that it's a boiler that has external temperature sensing and can do weather fluctuation and can modulate. My current boiler can't modulate. So it's oversized for the size of my flat. And so it runs for a really short period of time and it's kind of on full bore. It's like driving your car on a journey and accelerating to 100 miles an hour and stopping for 5 minutes and accelerating around. Like it's crazy, it's so inefficient. And it scratches the boiler and makes them not last as long. So what I'll do is I'll get a new boiler because I'm not ready for a heat pump. There's no plan for it. There's no way, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I'll make sure that I go that way. I think to answer your question, your situation, not giving you advice on your building, but get someone in who can have a look at your property, look at your heat demand, so the way that your property loses heat through the walls and the fabric, ideally room by room. Get them to look at your heating system and the way in which it is able to emit heat into your rooms to replace that heat that's being lost through the walls, and start to have some understanding from professional indemnity insurance to give you an answer to your question. Do you have any other options than a boiler at this point of time?
So who would be that person?
So,
Professional.
yeah, architects, technical consultants. There's another organisation that I can talk to you about privately after this. Yeah.
When you look at boilers at the moment, they should be either compatible. Is it something that's okay. So that the position out and all the that's what it's is it okay?
So I'm really very about it. The energy density of hydrogen is far lower than gas. So the amount of gas required to heat our homes is going to be far lower. More importantly, where is that hydrogen going to come from? And the place it's going to come from, if it's going to be clean, is from renewable electricity. So how do you create that hydrogen? You take the renewable electricity from a wind turbine, say, and you run it through an electrolyzer, and you lose some of the energy. There's going to be about 80% to 90% efficient, and then you need to transport the hydrogen to the houses. Highly flammable, very dangerous, another gas in your home, which is even more dangerous than natural gas. And you're then going to burn it in a hydrogen compatible boiler for efficiency in that. So you're going to be somewhere around about 60% efficiency. Instead, you could simply transport that electricity to the home and run a heat pump at 3-4 times efficiency, 300 or 400%. So you're actually gaining heat. It's a totally no-brainer. That's what we should be doing. It's also really important that we need to decarbonize other aspects of our economy using electricity. We can't be consuming all of our electricity to be generating hydrogen inefficiently to heat houses. We need to be saving that electricity for other industries that are more difficult to decarbonize.
So how long do they just come with this plan? Do we need to see them?
Well, maybe ask yourself who released this kind of the plans, look at where their existing networks are, and I think we'll have to so.
That's all the water needed for hydrogen.
Well, yeah, yeah.
I don't really know the answer to that one, but I guess is there a plan, is there a clear like runway to dramatically decreasing the cost of retrofit? So like creating modules in a factory or something, you use it for scale to decrease the cost of
Not at the scale we need.
Yeah.
There's multiple organisations like us who are working on large scale measures and approaches to bring those costs down. For example, the thing that we're working on, and we've got some research funding to explore this, is in our towns and cities, many of our homes are built to an identical like plan. So you go down rows of terrace streets and they're all sort of identical homes. Yet every time we go into our home to do an assessment, it's as if we walked into that home the first time. Well, that's inefficient. What can we do to create more of an archetypal plan and drive efficiency, perhaps by going street by street or neighbourhood by neighbourhood? Those are the sorts of things. Plus, also we have, that lack of demand and lack of supply problem. So have we really generated the supply chain efficiencies that are going to drive these costs down? I mentioned that, because I'm Australian, I'm really familiar with solar. Most of the reduction in cost of solar is to do with the supply chain and the cost of installation. That's where most of the cost savings come from. So I think there's a lot of promise in this space as well for us to bring this costs down. It's still going to be expensive. Glasgow City region of councils estimates that they take cost, would take 10.7 billion pounds of investment to retrofit our buildings. So that's a huge amount of money coming in to the city and the region, and we need to make sure as much of that money as possible is staying right here. And that's affordable.
Like on your feedback there, that there's bulk buys. So how big do you go? Like for example, we live in a Victorian converted townhouse that's been split into 5 flats. So do we look at it from 5 owners that try and go together to bulk buy? Do we look at it from the whole street, the whole neighborhood? How large should we, or like this? Obviously, that comes with all sorts of problems and concerns in terms of getting people together to share in and.
Yeah. We don't really know. We haven't actually done any bulk buys. But what there's an idea that we have is that we can make it easier. Because what you're really highlighting is how do you do a bulk buy? You have their use of repeating what you said. Right? And so because we're a co-op and we can start answering those questions. So we can work with households and streets that are wanting to tackle that problem with their neighbours. We've also got some research funding, like I mentioned, which is actually the bulk buy approach, that's an aspect to that same project. So we're looking to explore how we can do bulk buys. Sorry for a bit of a long answer, but if you want to talk more about bulk buys, because you think you might have an opportunity that you want, then we'd love to do that. We'd probably come away and
It's just an essentially the same question. I'm in exactly the same situation, but I'm also aware that there's talk of having common heating systems. So I'm not sure if that's considered bulk buying rather than just having a central heating plan, which distributes heat to 100 houses for the cost subsidized. That could be the answer. That gentleman's scheme that could be in line. If we can overcome all the hurdles getting to the human, etc. I mean, is that a viable solution? And that could also in Europe. I know, so why not Glasgow?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a viable solution for exactly the reason you outlined, because we've seen it viable in other locations, and there's no reason to think that it wouldn't work here. The Scottish Government has required every local authority in Scotland to come up with a local heating and energy efficiency strategy. They need to come up with it this year, And as part of that, that includes segregating areas that will be suitable for district heating, which is that on a bigger scale, and the consultation for both those LPs, like the energy efficiency strategy, is currently having a webinar on that next week. So have a look at our websites and social media to kind of into that. We're really interested in exploring minerals. And it's a bit like, as you say, a bit like that whole fight question. We're looking for households who want to collaborate with their neighbours to explore that. And we're looking for research funding opportunities so we can make that easier for those households. To bring that a little bit to life, two things. One is look at tenements, and most tenements haven't converted their loft space. So the question I would have is, could you use that communal space? Because it is a communal space. Is it not?
No, it's not.
Okay, could you turn that space into a communal space, so buy it off the top floor flat, and turn it into an energy place? In the back courts, we've got bins, and in parts of Glasgow, there's currently a pilot to remove that court bins and replace them with on-street bays. And if that were to go ahead, regardless of the controversies around that, if that were to go ahead, we would find ourselves with more space in our back courts. What could we do with that back space? It could be a communal heating source. For that, we could look at building various opportunities to have processes involved with a single communal heating source. Well, I think it's the sort of thing that we should be looking at.
I'm giving that ownership for this. The authorities or private landlords, or is that just
Like confidential. Yeah, so we are very focused on those privately owned homes. They're not uninterested in social housing connection, but that's an area that's kind of over controlled by the housing associations, and there's a lot of good work in that space, but there's also a lot of improvement to be made. So we want to work with housing associations, collaborate with them, and create the land concepts tenants for them to be better quality work. We're focused on private householders, and that means all private householders. So we are already speaking to some landlords, and we want to expand the number of our landlords that we're speaking to. And not naive about this. There's a wide variety of different types of landlords, and some of them most disadvantaged and drastically chronic housing conditions existing in private rental space. Housing associations don't tend to have like subhuman living conditions that they rent out. But nonetheless, it is a big part of what we want to do, tackle all of us. So I don't have any magic answers there, but we want to work with them. That is the last question.
I just wondered if you had any opinion on how farm makes sense to go on retrofit. So like the Nitry Road one down the south side, like the Passive House, that's extraordinarily expensive. So I guess it's a trade-off and probably a tipping point where it makes sense to stop doing it. Is it clear where that is?
Yeah, I've got lots of opinions. You might have figured it out. But I'm also not like a technical expert. I don't have training in building technology. I'm a social community organizer that knows how to run businesses. So my view and my co-founder Chris's view on this is that we need to strike the right balance of pragmatism. The Nitry Road project is extremely important, and we're big fans of it. And in fact, yesterday, with the Doors Open Days event, I was with under one roof doing a walking tour, and we stopped in at the Nitry Road event. And the key point I'd make about it is that the attempt to get that building to a flatted house standard, actually benefit, is really important because it tells us what's possible. Until we've actually done those projects, we don't even know what's possible. What's the most extreme length that we can go to? When we know that, we can then step back and say, what do we actually want to do? How expensive was it? By the way, on that project, there's a lot of talk about how expensive it was. Yes, it was expensive, but yet they went to a very high degree, a very high standard. But oftentimes we talk about that, we hear about that expense with the remedial work bundled in. It was actually a building in very poor state of repair, and they had to decant all the residents anyway. That's why they did that building. And as part of the cost, it was actually bringing them building up the modern spec, modern maintenance spec, and that's often bundled together in the cost. £100,000 per flat. And so what was the additional benefit stuff and put that? It was nowhere near £100,000. I think it's more like 40,000. That's a lot of money. I don't think we can afford that. So something below that number. Now there's a ready-made answer that's already stuck out there. There's an amazing organisation, AECB, Association for Energy Conscious Buildings. And they've got a two-step process to retrofit that we can strive to. And step one is to get a heat pump installed. To do some basic building fabric improvements to ensure that getting a heat pump is not going to be more expensive than gas. And then step two is to then drive down the energy consumption of that house. It sounds a bit backwards, but actually we need to drastically and rapidly decarbonize our buildings. So if we can get onto heat pumps and not have a rising bill, we should do that. Okay, final bonus question.
Which system are they going to use to finance?
So it's already built and all sorts of retrofitted. They've got heat pumps on ground and it's 8 flats from ground up to the 3rd floor. And I think they've got heat pumps on ground and 3rd floor, and they're traditional air source heat pumps in the back floor. On the 2nd and 3rd floor, off the levels, they've got gas boilers.
Is that how the house? How many house stored?
I don't really know. I think it might have been pragmatism. I didn't really know how they were going to do a heat pump. That was such a big distance from the building.
Both the excavation and both the thought
That's true. I'm not in fact to say they lots of post measurements. It's a research project and because practice out there, it gives me to be doing post evaluation, ongoing monitoring, to make sure the form is subject to what we are interested in. So it will be doing
yourself.
I haven't not chosen them every time. I just know that right now when my daughter dies, I'll get involved. I can't get it.
If that is a factor where you need.
I don't have a plan for it. Like I haven't had something to do that assessment to figure out what we would need to do to drive down our energy demand, where the infrastructure would sit, what the technology would be. So when my boiler dies unexpectedly next week, I do have a plan, and that is I will get a boiler and I'll make sure the boiler has these attributes so I can have a lower cost, lower carbon boiler. At the end of the day, boilers are not permanent. They last between 5 and 15 years, and that boiler, well, whatever, however long. Yeah, and I get a heat pump. Well, hold on. Thank you everybody for coming along, and I'm happy to stick around for more Q&A. But let's get the office podium and drink the water and let the people online up as well. So thank you.
Yeah, everybody. Thank you so much. Really thanks from That's also from